Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Destiny with James Cena Green. Want to remind you to go to our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Destiny with Jamie Green, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. This conversation tonight is going to be powerful, and there are so many other powerful conversations, life-changing conversations that we've had on this platform that I really think will bless your life. And so I want you to make sure you subscribe. Tonight, I am beyond thrilled because I keep telling people, well, people keep telling me that they are blessed by what I'm doing and they don't want me to give up and don't quit. And sometimes it feels
Right.
like you're talking and nobody's listening. But tonight, I am so blessed to have with me a young lady who's been there, been on both sides of this issue that I want to talk about, and she is making change. I want to talk with Marsha King, who is an advocate to the voiceless. Marsha is she's formerly impacted by the justice system as she endures circumstances that taught her the necessity of having an advocate on the outside. Understanding these limitations, the protection of the rights of inmates are the muse to her desire to serve as an activist to present and formal incarcerated individuals. You all know that's my heartbeat right there. And so I've been watching her and I've been so blessed by her. And I'm just beyond thrilled that she's joining us tonight. Marsha, welcome to our platform.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Miss Green.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, as I was reading your bio, of course, I'm getting real excited because I'm like, oh my God, everything she's doing is what I've been needing somebody to help me understand how to do. And in this area, I live on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And when you talk
Okay.
about the Eastern Shore of Maryland, people automatically think about Ocean City and going to the beach, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But we also have one of the largest state prisons within 15
Wow.
minutes of where I live. And we get very little um, notice in the media, very few activists talk about it. Um, I remember last year, I think it was when Governor Hogan was still in place, he came down this way to go to the beach. And, there was a whole big thing about him being on the beach. And me being me, well, you don't know me, but you'll know me in about 5 minutes. It was like, I sent him a message, like, while you're down here, are you planning on stopping by and checking out the prison to see? At that time, I think they had been like 3 days without running water or anything. And so it's just
Wow.
frustrating. Yes, it's frustrating to me because we have people here that are impacted by mass incarceration. As I mentioned to you earlier, I read somewhere the other day that Maryland leads in the number of incarcerated people, yet once you cross the bridge from the Baltimore area, it's like we're being ignored down here. So I thank you so much for taking this time to talk with us and share some information. If anyone has any questions or comments that you'd like to share while Ms. King is with us, please feel free to share that. Now, Ms. King, I want you to talk to us a little bit about the organization that you have that provides services. Your mission is to provide a wraparound of prison services for prisoners and their loved ones. What type of service specifically do you provide?
Uh, and thank you again for inviting me, Miss Green. So I have my organization, 13 Liberation Village, which is a nonprofit organization. We focus on advocacy and a whole lot of other things, but right now we're focusing on advocacy for those that are impacted by the criminal system. We also, my twin sister and I, because I have a twin sister, we also have
Okay.
our own business that we act as third party advocates as well for those that are impacted by the system doing pretrial, trial, um, and doing
Okay.
incarceration. So we address prison conditions, really basically anything that's dealing with the criminal system in prison. We address it. Because as you know, I'm formally impacted. I did
I
5 years
love that.
in federal prison. And when I actually went to prison, it's a crazy story. I was going to college to be a civil rights attorney. So I believe that the system worked.
Wow.
And I ended up getting a 22 count indictment and came down
Wow.
here to Virginia to face it. And my attorney, which was the same attorney as Michael Vick's attorney, Lawrence Woodward, I never forget him, worst attorney ever, basically told me, please.
Wow.
I said, no, I want to look at my discovery. I want an investigation. They didn't want to do any of that. And they put me in the worst judge's courtroom. And I'll just never forget the vulnerability that I felt not being able to fight for myself, because every time I said something, there were repercussions. So
Yes.
once I went through my jury trial, was found guilty, and they immediately took me to custody. All bets were off. I was fighting back because I was already in prison, I was in jail in holding facility at that point, away from my daughter. So all bets were off at that point, and I was ready for whatever.
I love it. I love it.
I
I
was ready
love
to
it.
fight this.
And yeah, and you said something that is very important. It's like the vulnerability that you feel sitting there. I remember when I sat in the courtroom when my son was, going through the whole trial, which was an absolute circus. You and I will talk about that one on one. But I was sitting there thinking, there's no way, if I didn't even know this person, there's no way he could be convicted of anything. Um,
Right.
and he ended up not only being convicted by a judge who was my former divorce attorney. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And, he's asking me how my family's doing, how my mom is doing. I mean, he's like, so I'm thinking, wow, this is interesting. And then he tells my child to stand up and he gives him 50 years, 25 for each assault. Like, what is this? Am I in the Twilight Zone? But there is a level of vulnerability, like you said, because you feel like I'm powerless. Nobody's going to talk to me. Nobody believes what I'm saying. That man sitting up there or that woman sitting up there in that robe has all the power, and now I have none. And so we need to hear from people such as yourself who say, that's not the end of it. It's a major part of it, but it's not the
That's
end of
right.
it. So how old was your child when you were incarcerated?
She had turned 1 exactly a week before I went to prison.
Wow,
She was 1, and she's 9 now. So
that's amazing.
that was that was my driving force, but also because Judge Rebecca Smith kept threatening to put me in a holding facility to wait for trial, because I kept fighting against my attorney, um, demanding that he actually review my case, go over the discovery, and he ended up giving me my discovery. But he would go to trial, he would go to court, have these hearings, and he would say, "Well, she's not cooperating. How am I not cooperating? Because I'm asking questions,
Right,
relevant questions pertaining to my defense." So they would
exactly.
have these hearings because I wouldn't plead guilty. And he would say, "Well, she won't cooperate." She'll say, "Well, Miss King, if you don't cooperate, I'll put you in the holding facility to make sure you'll cooperate." But then he would get up and say, "Well, she does meet with me. I have a right to not agree with you either." And I
That's
didn't
right. That's
agree
right.
with the force to plead guilty. So that was one of our biggest issues. But it was a blessing in disguise, Miss Green, because I tell you, when I went into custody, I went to Norfolk, and it was just the most degrading thing I had ever gone through. I was still in my trial clothes, and I was in disbelief that I was in the holding facility. In my mind, I was waiting on Judge Smith to say, take her out of custody. So when I went through the process of being stripped out of my clothes, sprayed for lice under my arms and my body, and then put under literally a dim light with water, it was so
Wow.
traumatic for me. And then I was put into a cell with 20 other women because Norfolk is not a women's facility. It's not. It was at that point it had become a men's facility, and then they had to find a federal holding facility. At
Okay.
that point, I wanted to know what could I do to make her accountable for what she had done to me, because I still had rights. And that's when I learned how to do a judicial misconduct against the judge with the appellate court, which my court was the Fourth Circuit. So I was smart with how I would do things. I would write everything out, but I would mail it to my sister and I would get her to mail it, because
Okay.
a lot of people don't know judges have a lot of stakes in these county jails, which is why they're so packed. So
I believe
I wanted
that.
to
I
make
believe that.
sure. So I wanted to make sure that my mail got to where it was going. So on the eve of me being sentenced, the Fourth Circuit stepped in and took me out of Judge Smith's courtroom due to my judicial misconduct that I filed against her for violating my due process and giving me a fair trial. And they put me in another judge's courtroom, Judge Raymond Jackson. And that was really a blessing in disguise, because having him as my judge ended up affecting my case in the long run, which was beneficial to me being released under the First Step Act 5 years later. Had I been
That's
in her
powerful.
courtroom, because she didn't want to grant anybody's First Step Act, I would have still been in prison probably to September 2022.
Wow. That's powerful information because one of the things that my organization does, A Mother's Cry, is I speak with and speak for mothers who have children who are incarcerated. And there are
Wow.
some mothers that I work with who also have been incarcerated. But I'm just, it's just a blessing to be able to connect with you because I know that I can get information to better help those that I'm trying to serve. But what exactly, someone asked the question, what exactly does that entail being a third party advocate? Because I hear people all the time saying, I'm advocating for this, I'm advocating for that, but they can't specifically say what in the heck it is that they're doing. So when you say you're a third party advocate, what exactly does that entail? And how does someone get somebody to advocate for them?
Okay. A third party advocate, what that entails is I serve as an advocate for the defendant or the person, the accused. I serve as I'm the middle person between him and his attorney. I ensure that his attorney communicates with him properly. His attorney makes sure that he review his case with him properly. If there's any question that the defendant or the accused have and he doesn't understand, I make sure he get a clear understanding in regards to that case. If there's anything he has a question about, I go research it for him and I find it. And then I act as the person to give it to him, to make sure that the attorneys explain it to him properly. And if he feels the attorney is not explaining it to him properly, I go to the attorney to ask to explain to him properly and make sure that he or she has a clear understanding of whatever those proceedings are, whether it's pretrial motions, the trial itself, the appeal, the post conviction phase, either one of those. And then, in addition, as a part of that advocacy, if they're on, say, they've exhausted their remedies and they're trying to get back into court on a post conviction or in the feds, any other type of relief, I will also go and speak with the district attorney as their representative to go over their case, whatever their injustice is, or even go and talk to legislature for them, if applicable, because everybody's not applicable to go and bring in,
Yeah.
speak with the district attorney or to legislature.
this is great information because, like I say, my son has been incarcerated now for like 18 years, I think. Um,
Wow.
so at age 25, he was 25 years old, had a brand new baby that he had never even touched or held or anything.
Wow.
And he asked the judge, once he was sentenced, he said, "Can I kiss my sons goodbye?" He had two sons. The judge said, "It's up to the deputy, it's not up to me," which I
Wow.
think was true. But anyway, of course, the deputy said no. Um, and so it's that whole feeling of now I've become property of the state, and they don't, I have no voice, I have no rights, because you don't know what your rights are. Just because you're sitting at the table, you put your life in the hands of the person sitting next to you that's supposed to be your attorney, whether they're good or bad at their job or not. And then this one person sitting on the bench in the black robe, who clearly was having a bad day. And so then you walk out of there feeling like my life is over. And the family members, such as myself, because I get asked a lot, how did you feel when you heard that man give your son 50 years? And I said, to be honest, I was numb. Like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like, who does that? Um, but to know that there is somebody that can advocate for you, that somebody can speak for you in the terms that you need them to speak, that understands how you feel, is very important, especially for the family members, because somebody
Right.
said, yeah, I used to hear this years ago. When someone is doing time, their family members and loved ones are doing time also. And that is extremely true. So I am very grateful for the
I agree.
information that you've given, and I'm going to make sure that we get your contact information and everything before you leave. Someone, Mr. Stephen Bradford, posted something that is going to be very beneficial to me, and I'm going to definitely look this up. But because I never even knew that if you got a lengthy sentence in Maryland, that you could get a second look. Like, this is what I'm saying to you about the lack of information um, down here on the Eastern Shore. Um, I had a guest on the show who was formerly incarcerated, and she talked about the difference in being like in the Baltimore area and then coming down here to the Eastern Shore, even with regard to reentry programs. Like, they give you information
Yes.
while you're on that side of the bridge, saying this is what you can do when you get back to the Eastern Shore. But when you get to the Eastern Shore, you don't even know who you're supposed to talk to. And then the people you do reach out to, they act like they never even heard of a reentry program. So it's
Right.
important it's important to be connected to people that have this information. And I appreciate you for sharing that, Mr. Bradford. And I definitely will be looking into that. I see that you placed the link also in the comments for anyone, including myself, that has a loved one who has received a lengthy sentence. Let's please take advantage of this information. Now, I wanted to ask you, Ms. King, you also are known as a social and human rights advocate and activist. What human rights do you think are violated in our prisons, whether state or federal? I know it's probably a long list, but can you summarize for us what
Whew.
violations that you think occur?
I think that one of the one of the most important rights that are violated across the board for people, whether it's federal or state, is the right to due process. A lot of people don't understand, and due process is basically if anything is done to you, if it's an incident report, shot, anything that is done to you, that you're able to have a hearing, you're able to address it. That's something that a lot of people are afraid to file grievances against the prison or the officers, because they're afraid of retaliation. One thing that helped
Yes.
me was I had someone family on the outside that if there was something that I didn't address, that she would address it for me. I would always write letters and write it
Yes.
out and never communicate through their communication. Okay. I was always smart about that and still smart about that. Because your grievance procedure is what documents everything that goes on inside of that prison, from the way you serve your sentence to your actual prison conditions, and even the way that you're treated. When I was in prison, I was written up one time, and I was written up because one of the unit manager was upset with a racial issue that I had addressed. We had a young lady to use the N word, got upset and called all us the N word. This was at Alderson FPC, and they did more to protect her than they did to
Yeah.
address the issue. Okay, they made more of an issue because she was upset about the noise than the racist word that she used.
Right.
So I pushed it because I was like, if you allow her to say it, then somebody else is going to feel comfortable to say it.
That's right.
So I addressed it properly because my mom was always told me, whether it's a job, wherever you go, you learn their policy. So I learned their
Yeah.
policy. Um, and when I learned their policy, I pushed it. Next thing I know, we have this search, and SIS like, we never, what search? So I come to find out the search was just to harass me, and I got an incident report
Yeah.
about a pillow, simple pillow. But I did my research, and I'm telling you something, Miss Green. I walked into that room for that hearing. I had my paper already filed to let them know I need you recused because you want to. It was like, oh, Miss King, hold on, hold on, hold up. We said
All
we was
right
gonna do all
now.
that. Long story short, it got dismissed, and I was the only one there. Everybody else tried it thereafter. Nobody else was able to get a shot, an incident report dismissed, but I was dismissed. And then while the
Wow.
shot was pending, they had moved me to the front of the unit where all the noise that was served as a punishment. I was right back in my
Yeah.
stirring room. They were, how did that happen? You have to not be afraid. But on
Yeah.
the outside, we have to realistically support them too, as well. If there's an issue
Ex-
that's going on inside the prison that's affecting, let's say for your son, then we reach out to all of our networks and we all start calling in. You reach out to your legislature that governs that particular area and you get him your Congress. Because Congress, a lot of people, they call their senator. No, call your Congress. Your Congress has a right to do a congressional inquiry into that situation, and you get them to move it. And then that way, they see us. Oh no, don't mess with Mr. Green. His mom gonna call down here. We ain't got time for that.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's about us, them doing their part, and we're supporting them as they do their part. But that is one of the
That's
basic rights that are violated. A lot of people don't understand, like even with Social Security and other benefits, when you get denied, what's the first thing they say? You have a right to a hearing. That's called due process. Okay, you have a right to a hearing to be heard on everything. So those are one of the number one things that are denied in prison, and that's why a lot
right.
of situation and issues are not addressed.
And I'm gonna tell you, as I was listening to you talk, like once again, I'm like really fired up and encouraged, um, because one of my biggest concerns is, and those who know me, especially those who support this platform, and those who always would hear my mouth running on social media, is I have absolutely no issue with pointing out concerns I have at this local prison. When I find out they don't have any water, I send an email to the department, to the secretary of the Department of Public Services, Correction Service in Baltimore. Of course, it took forever to get any response back. And then I sent emails to my congressman and to local
Right.
politicians, no response. So currently, I started a petition which you signed. Thank you so much.
You're
Um,
welcome.
regarding having a family liaison in these prisons, because half the time we don't know what's going on around here. Like where my son is located, sometimes the prison is on lockdown for days and days and days, and I don't hear from him. So I know then, it's probably on lockdown again, because the catchphrase right now is short staff. Everything is done because they're short
Right.
staff. So for days and days, you don't get a shower, you don't get fresh air, you don't get sunshine, because they're short staffed. So I'm always the one calling and calling and calling until I get somebody on the phone. And I'm thinking, if we had a family liaison in these state prisons, then we could call that person and say, hey, what's going on here? And then they could tell us, and then we don't have to sit around waiting for somebody to answer the phone. I'm gonna share this with you, and then I'm gonna get back to you, to your letting you talk, because I get really fired up about this whole situation. Not just because it's my son that's serving this asinine sentence, but I remember during the COVID outbreak, when prisons were, prisons, state and federal, are already petri dishes of
Right.
the bacteria and germs of everything you could think of. And when the COVID thing hit, I had a mother that was calling me. Her husband was in prison in Delaware, and she said she talked to him almost every day. And several days had passed. She didn't hear from him. She sent money to be put on his book. She didn't hear anything. 2 weeks go by. She's still calling the prison, like, wants to know what's going on. Nobody answers the phone. Finally, somebody answers the phone and says, oh, we were going to contact you today. Your husband passed this morning from complications of the COVID virus. And he had been in the infirmary for
Wow.
2 weeks, and nobody had contacted her. Can you imagine? Like, that's why when I don't hear from my son for a few days, because he's one of those that calls 2 or 3 times a day. Like, sometimes I'm thinking, oh my God, dude. But he calls his mother every day. So when 2 or 3 days go by, I'm calling down there. Like, okay, is there something wrong with, at the prison? Is he on lockdown? What is going on? And like you say, everybody needs somebody on the outside to
That's right.
advocate for them. Like they don't need to feel that they've been forgotten. And this is what I tell those people who come at my throat saying, well, if they hadn't committed a crime, they wouldn't be in there. And I'm like, well, apparently you don't follow the news, because there's a lot of people who have or been in prison who were innocent. Um, but regardless to
Right.
what
And
they,
not only that, you don't lose your civil rights. Because I tell people when they say that to me, Miss Green, I'm sorry. That made me mad when you say that, because I hear that a lot. When
yeah,
you go to prison, you don't lose your civil rights. It doesn't matter who it is. From the people that go to prison that we don't like, to the people that go to prison that are innocent or over sentenced, they still do not lose their basic rights. So whether they're in
yes,
prison
ma'am.
or not, the things that are civil rights are basically they have their needs met, like food, clothes, and shelter, and they have to keep them safe.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I'm one of those people, like, I'm gonna always be speaking up. I don't care who gets
That's
mad, who
right.
gets glad. Like, someone's like to me, oh my God, they're probably gonna be um tapping your phone. And I'm like, I don't give a ham sandwich about them tapping your phone. I'm trying to make sure my son is alive, for God's sake. And I
That's
just feel
right.
so inspired by you. And yeah, like, there are still certain rights that they should have. And the problem is that we don't always know those rights, and we get overwhelmed because we don't know how to fight for those rights. And that's why it's so important to be connected to people like you doing the work that you're doing, so we can learn that just because they're behind that wall, that does not take away the fact that they have basic human rights, civil rights, even constitutional rights that
That's
have
right.
to be acknowledged.
And they can sue.
Yeah,
But when you were talking about COVID, one of the things that and not to exclude state, but because I did federal time, I have a whole lot of connections with federal. But one of the things that we did, we would call the case managers, we would call the captain, we would call the warden, we would keep emailing them when a family member would post or would call and say, I haven't heard from my family member. We were even able to get one of the young ladies whose mother passed away, unfortunately. She was able to go sit with her mother the last week or so
Wow.
before she passed away. And then the BOP, well, at least at Alderson, they set up a line specifically for the families to be able to call the HSU, which is the hospital within the prison, to let them know that we're going on with family members. But we were very forceful. So what families has to do is when all of there's a family member in, let's say, Alderson Federal Prison, all the wives, mothers, daughters exchange numbers and connect. So that way, everybody
Yes.
can stay connected with what's going on at that prison. When they put you on lockdown, okay, the prisons, whether it's state or fed, FYI, every 72 hours, they are supposed to allow you a shower and to be released from that cell for exercise or whatever. That's where the grievance procedure comes into place. When they deny you that right, write them up. Start
Yeah.
file, because once you write them up and they refuse to address it, you can then file a civil lawsuit in court. If you keep filing, then the Department of Correction or BOP is going to come in to see what's going on, which is one of the reasons we were in DC last week with dream.org, because we're pushing for a BOP oversight committee that's totally independent of the
Okay.
prison, that we can address issues that's going on within the prison, such as them not getting their credits, excessive lockdowns,
Yes.
staff shortage, things of that sort. So it comes, that's where third party advocacy come in again. I have clients when they call me and say I haven't heard from my son, I'm calling down to the prison and I'm talking to the
Yeah.
counselor, because you can call the counselor or the case manager, which most times you get the voicemail, and you just, hey, this is Marsha King. I'm a third party advocate. I'm calling to check on Ted Green. I need to know that he's okay. This is a courtesy check. I will be calling you back within the next hour. Next thing you know, ring, 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 mama, you call. We got calling down here.
Yeah.
You got to
Yeah.
be
That's right.
forceful, aggressive. You have to make them treat your loved ones right. And I tell people, even if you're not directly impacted, you can
That's right.
still address issues, because these are just basic human rights. People deserve to
Basic
be
human
treated
rights.
right. You don't have to put them in a resort, but you can treat them
That's
right
right.
and give them favorable prison conditions, especially
That's
if you
right.
want these people to be rehabilitated. If you treat them like a dog, then what you think gonna happen when they come out? The
And see,
recidivism
that's
rate is
another
not gonna
issue.
drop. They're gonna come right back.
That's another issue I have is like I don't think that these concrete plantations is what I call them. I don't think they have any interest whatsoever in rehabilitating people. I remember when I was doing my social work internship, and I was at a local detention center, and I asked the warden. I said, "Do you think that incarceration is about I mean, I'm sorry, I
Rehabilitation.
forget my words sometimes after the stroke. Rehabilitation or punishment?" And without even taking a breath, he said, "Oh, absolutely punishment. I don't care about the rehabilitation." So I said, "Well, that's why your rate is so high." He looked me in my
Right.
face and said, "Well, I call that job security," and kept on walking. And I said, and it's so many people in those positions of authority that have that same attitude. And you're right,
Right.
Stephen Bradford, because I'm one of those people that will call, and because my son, he's pretty much like his mom, turned up 100%, because he's going to speak out for himself and for other
That's
inmates.
right.
So he's always under the light. Like he called me, and I'm telling you this real funny story real quick. He said, "Mom, I had a job for 15 whole minutes." And I said, "What?" And he said that he was given the position of tier rep. And he said, and then I saw this older gentleman who had just come back from the hospital from having surgery, and he had canes. I mean, crutches. They took the crutches for him because they said that it was a safety thing. And his bed or whatever you call it, wherever he was going to be housed at, was like up 2 flights of steps. And he said, when I looked over, he said, the man, he would remind me of my grandfather. He said he was head his head down and his shoulders was going up and down. And when I went over, he said, that man was crying. And he said, and I said, sir, what's the matter? He said, I can't get up those steps. So he said, so as a tier rep, I go make a whole bunch of noise and telling them what they need to do, da 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 da. They brought, eventually got him housing down where he didn't have to go up the steps. He said, and as soon as they got him in his place, in his cell, they came to me and said, you can go back to your cell now because you're not going to be tier rep anymore. And he said, and I just burst out laughing because I know it was just because I had spoken up for that man. He said, but that's who I am and that's what I'm going to do. And I said, that's just sad. Like, I don't know. It's just
You
overwhelming.
hitting it
Some
right on the
days you
head,
be
Miss
like,
Green. You hitting it right on the head, Miss Green, because you hear
sometimes
stories,
you think about your loved ones in there, you just cry. Yeah.
and that's okay. And then once when you finish crying, Miss Green, we transition to a solution. What can we do
Yeah.
to start helping those like your son? One of the things, major things that I think a lot that needs to be done in the state, which I have started doing in the state of Tennessee, because I do a lot of federal work, because that's what directly impacted me.
Yeah.
So my heart is in the feds because I know
Right.
how it works. I see I see a couple of my Fed sisters on on your podcast now, so they can tell you when I was in the Feds,
All right.
I was the jailhouse lawyer. So I was helping people get out.
Okay.
I want that to be adapted into the
Yes. Yeah.
states. And one of the major things that
Yes.
the feds have that I'm trying to now work on getting into the state of Tennessee is the compassionate release on how it's been expanded. And
Okay.
that includes so many different things that if the prison is not able to adequately take care of someone, you could get a
Right.
release. Okay. We had Miss Bernetta. She's one of my Fed sisters. She had 40 years and she had a condition that they just wasn't doing right medically by her. Okay. She was released. Okay. I was released
Okay.
um, based on having asthma during COVID. And because I had rehabilitated
Yeah.
myself, what they call rehabilitating myself, but I learned law in prison. So I asked them to dismiss an indictment, one part of my indictment that gave me time served. So those are the kind of reform that needs to take place in the state. So people like your son that was over sentenced, which can be filed on a compassion release, sentencing disparities, okay, non-retroactive laws. So the feds have created a blueprint that we need to start advocating in the state for men like your son that have been over sentenced, which I'm sure 50 years for an assault, that's excessive. Most states for an assault, the most that you get is between 5 to 15. Okay. So if he's doing 50 years, that's excessive. But a lot of people don't pretty much fight a lot of the sentencing. You have a lot of the district attorneys now that's kind of trying to take after Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, which I studied his prosecutorial reform. And that's why I want to send a big shout out to Steve Morrow and the district attorney in Memphis that's really trying to bring a lot of change. And you have the citizen of Memphis that really do not realize what it is that he's trying to do to really move a lot of the Jim Crow laws that they were doing in the
Yeah.
background with
Yeah.
Amy Wyrick and others. He's really trying to bring that change, and you have a lot of people fighting against him. We need those in all states because the person, I'll never forget,
Yes.
the Fourth Circuit Appellate Court said this: and he said this when talking about making a decision on a compassionate release. He said a compassionate release is like a resentencing. The person that stands before us today is not the same person that may have stood up before us years ago. So based on
Right,
that,
right.
they deserve a reduction. We need to adapt that not only in the feds, we need to adapt that in every state, because there are a lot of
Absolutely.
sentencing disparities. There are a lot of
Absolutely.
times that our black men, and it's just a fact. It's not being racist. It's a fact. It's been proven.
It's
The
a
data
fact.
proves
That's
it.
right.
That they get higher sentences than white men. I've
Absolutely.
seen it even in compassionate releases when I do research, that it'll be a black man and a white man have the same case, a 924C, a drug conspiracy, but the judge's compassion for the white defendant and giving a
Yeah.
reduction is far greater than the black or the brown person, where they call the black or brown person, they're still a threat to
Yeah.
society, but they said a white man has been rehabilitated. That is the point of passing laws such as these that need to be adopted also in the state as well, especially drug conspiracy laws, to make sure that all people are being treated fairly. We're not saying that everybody is innocent. We're not saying that people shouldn't go to jail.
That's
What we're
right.
saying is charge them correctly, stop overcharging them. Issue with your son as far as the 50 years that he's serving, that's excessive. You see what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
whatever that they use to
Absolutely.
enhance his sentence, okay, if he was in the feds, he has the opportunity to file a motion so they can be reviewed, and he could say, hey, if I was sentenced today, I wouldn't have been sentenced the same today, and he would get a reduction.
Yeah.
Okay, that shouldn't just apply to the feds, because that should apply to everyone. So what we have to start doing as advocates is start
Absolutely.
lobbying our legislature on the state level to start doing what the feds have started doing. If first they admit there's a problem in the criminal
Yes.
system, okay, we got to stop saying there's not a problem. There's a big problem. Okay, when slavery
That's
ended,
right.
then they
That's
put it
right.
into the criminal system.
That's right.
Period. The end. Okay.
That's
Number
right.
two, men like your
Absolutely.
son that have been in prison over 10 years, okay, those are the victims of over sentencing and overcharging. Sometimes I'm going to give you an example. I have a person that calls me from the state of Tennessee that was charged with attempted murder, and then he has 2 counts, possession of a firearm, and I can't remember what the other charge was, but it was dealing with the firearm. It was basically the same thing, because if you're charged with
Yeah.
attempted murder,
Yeah.
that's including a weapon. So if you charge him
Right. I
twice
can't.
with the
I can't
possession of
attempt.
the firearm,
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying? He had 30 years for the firearm, and he had 10 years for the attempted manslaughter. So I was like, well, how does that make sense? He got 40 years.
Yeah.
Okay, for attempted murder.
Absolutely.
That's the sentence you get for murder. Am I saying he should have
That's
gone to
correct.
prison? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is he
That's
should have
right.
had a fair and just sentence. And he shouldn't have been charged 3 times for the same charge. But that's what
Absolutely.
happens when people are not speaking up, and people are saying that we
For
just
the
believe
same
in
charge.
whatever these politicians get up and say, like Senator Taylor in the state Senate in Memphis. They had nothing to say when Amy Wildwood were over sentencing. But now he wants an investigation because the district attorney and Judge Skyhand reduced 161 sentences for a non-violent offense, where the 2 prior convictions that enhanced in sentence has been deemed invalid. What a waste of resources. So you're mad because he's actually
That's
coming
right.
in administering justice to all these manifest injustice. That's a problem. That's why I do what I do. That's why we need more than just me speaking up. We need everyone that calls
Yeah.
themselves an advocate, abolitionist, whatever you call yourself, or you just call yourself a concerned citizen. These will address these issues, because one day it
Yes.
could be
Yes.
your
Yes.
family member. And then where were you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Someone asked a really good question. Due to the treatment Ms. Green explained about her son, does that cause emotional drama and problems later? Absolutely. Um, my son, when he was incarcerated, because at 25, you say to him, I'm giving you a 50-year sentence. That pretty much means you're useless. We're done with you. We're just taking your whole life away.
That's right.
Um, and at that time, he had two minor children. These boys have now grown up. One graduated high school this year. The other one will graduate next year, and they've not had their father in their life at all. They have had some emotional response and trauma due to their father not being there. My son has had some emotional trauma for not being able to be in their lives. I've had some emotional trauma because that's my baby. I don't care what he did. I don't care how old he is. He's still my baby. I have another son who just turned 31 yesterday, who was 12 when his brother got sent away, and it impacted his life in so many ways. He kept getting in trouble in school, just all kinds of emotional issues. So, absolutely, this is why I say to people, stop being so insensitive and inconsiderate, because
Yes.
this impacts so many people, not just the person that you want to throw away, but there are many of us out here that are impacted by mass incarceration. Thank you for answering
I
that
agree with you, Miss
question.
Green. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I
Absolutely.
suffered from. I never had any mental health issues until I went to prison, and when I was released, my major issue, I think, for the first week, it was hard for me to even sleep because I had developed extreme anxiety. I had PTSD from trial, from pre-trial, from how I was treated. Uh, and even now, there are certain things that when I'm out advocating, it still affects me and causes trauma, uh, especially going into the courtroom. When I hear judges
Yeah.
down, you a liar, you a thief, you will never be nothing. First of all, let
Yeah.
me tell
Yeah.
you, judges have canons to abide by. One of them is to treat
Yeah.
every person that comes into their courtroom with respect. So that means when they talk to you like that, you have every right to file a judicial misconduct. The appropriate
Okay.
parties can never do anything if you never file anything. When I filed my judicial misconduct on Judge Rebecca Smith for how she treated me during trial, I wasn't the only one. My complaint was similar to everybody else's complaints.
Mhm.
But if no one ever speaks up, then in
Right.
my case, the Fourth Circuit would have known. If you're in the state, your state Supreme Court is who you file your complaint to. They won't know. If they keep getting the same complaint on the judge, then guess what? Something can be done. But if everybody keep
Yeah.
being scared, oh, I'm scared, he this, and that. At the end of the day, this way I feel, this Green, what you scared of? They go if they trying to put you in jail, that's what you need to be afraid of. So being afraid to speak up, that should be the least of your concern. Being afraid of getting all
Absolutely.
that time should be
Yeah.
your concern. Speak up against these
Absolutely.
judges and speak up against these prosecutors because there are
Yes.
people that they have to report to as well. So
Yes.
don't let your trauma keep you from addressing things that need to be addressed so we can bring
Yes, ma'am.
change.
Yes. I love that. And it's funny because some years later, the prosecutor that prosecuted my son's case, um, he left the state prosecutor's office and became a defense attorney. So I reached out to him, and I knew he wasn't going to do anything, but I reached out to him anyway because I'm a mom and I'm desperate. And he says, "Well, I really can't, represent your son or anything because it would be a conflict of interest." He said, "But let me just say something to you. I was shocked, number one, that your son was found guilty. There was no physical evidence, no eyewitness, no nothing. But I was even more shocked at the sentence that he received." He said, "I was like stunned. I couldn't believe it." I said, "I know, I could tell from the look on your face." He said, but there's really nothing I can do. And so that's played over in my head for years, because when your child calls you, and my son is a very strong person, he started a business since he's been in prison. He teaches class, um, stuff like that. But when he says to me, Mom, sometimes I lay on this little teeny mattress and I cry for all that I've lost. Both of the grandparents that he was raised with have since died, since he's been incarcerated, and he was not, of course, able to attend any of their funerals. There's just been so many things that he's missed out on. And as a mom, it hurts me when my children hurt, no matter what
Right.
other people think. I'm going to do what I can do until I stop breathing. I'm going to advocate not just for my son, but for other people's sons as well.
But let me tell you this, Ms. Green, where you
I just
start.
didn't know where to go.
Well, let me tell you where to start. And I think that Judge Gleason said it best in this case, United States versus Holloway. It's a case that's in New York. And I'll never forget reading that case when I was incarcerated. He said that a prosecutor never lose the power or the authority to correct an injustice. So with that being said, the first step is go back to the prosecutor's office, because that is something that they can still correct to this day. And you ask for a meeting. And when you sit down and you talk to them the same way that you've talked to us as the audience. A lot of people do not understand the power and the authority that prosecutors have. They have really more authority and power than the judge does. Why the judge most times always side with the prosecutor in a sentence, because they know that the prosecutor does what? They appeal it. Okay. So that's why most times they side with the prosecutor. But a prosecutor
Yeah,
at any point can go in and correct, dismiss an indictment, reduce a sentence, because what they say and what they do is binding. Okay. So they have
right.
that authority. And if you look at a lot of these stories where men were gone 20 and 25 years, even with Larry Crosner, a lot of people what was upset when he became the prosecutor in Philadelphia. But look at the number of cases that have been reviewed and the number of people that have been released, because he understood his power and his authority. And he's the
Yeah,
one that began prosecutorial reform and doing the right thing, that if there was a case that shouldn't have been prosecuted, or a person was overcharged or even sent or even indicted, he's been corrected that for years. And he started with firing everybody in the office. Sometimes you got to start from scratch, and he did that. So I want to
yeah,
advise people, you have the right to go in and talk to your district attorney, okay, and ask for a meeting to discuss your son, your husband case after he's been sentenced, okay? And you can look at the complaint, you can look at the discovery. It's all available to the public. But it's like you said, is a lot of people don't do it
yeah,
because they don't know. And the only reason I know
right.
is I didn't want what happened to me to happen to anybody. It was traumatic when the judge said 100 months. It's not close to the time that your son has done, but 100 months seemed like forever when you just had a child and you had a life out here and you were being convicted of something that you had no knowledge of. So that was hurtful and
Yeah,
traumatic. And I said, where I'm going, which at every stop in transit, I was on that law library. I want to know everything that they know. And I started filing paperwork. And when I did my 2255, which is a federal post conviction, Lawrence Woodworth said his response was, she's filed something against every last one of them. And I said, not one, every last one of them. I was determined to let them know that you did not get the best of me. When I was in prison, I could sleep good
yeah,
every night knowing that I fought back. But when it was time to go,
yeah.
it was time to go. I was like, I don't know if you ever seen that movie Hurricane. When he said, I can't do the time, I said, I can't do no more time, God. It's time to
That's
go.
right.
And I was out
That's
June
right.
30th, 2020, filed that paperwork with Judge Raymond Jackson. And I was so afraid to file the paperwork because I had filed paperwork against even him because I just felt wronged. And I'll never forget, I was asleep and God
Yeah.
woke me up and said, write the paperwork. And I just wrote it in pencil before I could change my mind. And the officer was around, walking around, taking me. I said, let me hear her get to him before I change my mind. And 2 weeks later, he had granted it. And the lawyer that they assigned, Todd, he said, unfortunately, Judge Jackson denied it. My sister said, did you read the paperwork? She didn't get denied. He said, granted. He said, time served to be released no later than June 30th. Okay. But not only that, I was released under the CARES Act because my sister had called Tim Kaine. She had called Jennifer McCullough, and I forgot the other one, Donald. He passed away about a year ago. But they all had done an inquiry to the BOP and asked why I hadn't been released from federal custody. So either way it go, I was due to be released June 30th, 2020. So don't be afraid to
Wow.
speak up. It's your life, it's your freedom. And she had had a meeting with the same prosecutor that convicted me. So either
I
way, I
love
was
it.
coming out because
Yes.
she dared to speak up and I dared to speak up. So speak up.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, I'm I don't want I could talk to you all night because I'm really learning a lot, but
You went back so
I know you
fast.
got stuff to do. But I know you have stuff to do. But I talked to my son um, and told him that I was going to be speaking with you tonight, try to give him a little bit of idea of what I knew about you. And he asked me to ask you a question. Um,
Sure.
one of the things he's dealing with right now, but again, because you're not dealing with the state prisons, you might not even know the answer, but I'll ask anyway.
I
He
do deal
is
with the state
trying
prison.
to, and he has, okay, there's a couple of guys that want to take online classes,
Okay.
but in the state of Maryland, like you can't hardly do anything, to be honest. So, where would you point people that want help with being able to take classes while they're incarcerated?
Okay. So the federal government, and this is not just for people in the feds, this is for everyone incarcerated. They just made available a Pell Grant for people that are incarcerated to be able to attend college. So um, I have a list of the schools that are taking the grants
Okay,
because probably where he is, some prisons are not equipped to take the online classes, so they still doing the old school mail in. And then I know most
right. That's the issue. That's the issue where he is they don't have access to online,
so then
which really is something else that irks me.
they do it on. I feel like they do it intentionally, because that's rehabilitation.
I do too.
So we have to go through and just look through these schools that accept it to see which schools would actually cater to the state of Maryland for mail-in, to do their school through mail-in. Now, I tell people this: Alderson didn't have any online classes either. I would just get my family members when I wanted to learn law. I would just get everybody to send me a book and I started just teaching myself. Okay. So tell your son to
Okay,
do that as well. But number two, we're going to find out which schools are available for him to get the material mailed in. And then probably what they would do after
okay,
that is if he needs to take a test, you can get the case manager, unit manager, or to proctor it, which means that they're just there to watch him bubble in. Okay. So we're gonna see which one of these
okay,
schools that have the Pell Grant, because all people that are incarcerated, okay, are now eligible to receive a Pell Grant, okay, through the federal
okay.
government to attend college. So you just have to
I
find the
love it.
college that accepts the Pell Grant and then see what programs they have. Blackstone, the paralegal program, they do it for everybody, state and fed. Theirs are all mail in. Okay. But they've always done it. And if he wants to do paralegal, they have a good program. So let's find out what it is that he wants to do, and we're going to find the appropriate school that would
Okay.
accept mail-in, so he can start doing his classes. And then also tell him to self-teach. They can't dispute
Yeah.
that. Teach yourself whatever
That's
it is that you can. Teach yourself spirituality.
yeah.
There's a lot of spirituality classes that are also mail-in too, because I took some spirituality classes. That was one of the things that helped me to maintain my peace and help me to get through anxiety. And
Yeah.
then also us supporting them through these
Yeah.
holidays. These holidays, this is when suicide rates are at the highest. And I've been stressing this on all my social media as far as us being a support. And I thank everybody that has donated to 13 Liberation, because we put money on people that are incarcerated books, and we send them books, and we also send them cards. So we do that as well, but
Okay.
keep in contact with our loved ones that are incarcerated.
Absolutely, because the holiday is hard. It's hard to know that your family may be getting together, or and especially with me. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep myself together.
That's
Especially
okay.
with all of the health challenge, with all of the health challenges that I've had. Um, he's worried and he's concerned about, am I okay? Um, and so, if he calls me and he can't reach me, he gets, really upset. Or lately, the communication system in the Maryland State prisons is absolutely the worst. Half the time you can't hear what somebody's saying, and the phone's cut off and all that foolishness. But um, the holidays are extremely hard for him, and he won't come out and say that. But it's like, Mom, you okay? Are you? Do you need anything? Like, I don't know. He says, I don't know what I can do, but I'll see if I can get somebody to do. So it's just like this time of year is very challenging for us that have loved ones who are incarcerated, but at the same
Yes,
time, they need us. They need to know that they're not forgotten. I'm gonna say this and then I'm gonna let
that's
you go
right.
because I've already talked your ears off. Um,
That's okay.
when he was when he was arrested, I remember when they allowed him to make that one phone call, and the one thing he said to me was, "Mom, please don't abandon me." And I've heard those words for years in my spirit, and even more recently. And fighting for him, advocating for him, speaking up for him is one of the things that keeps me going on those days when my health challenges are so great. I don't even want to get out of bed, but I keep
Yes,
pushing because I need to see my son come home.
that's
Yeah,
right. And that's why I try to stress to people the importance that when we get out, I didn't forget. It didn't take me to do 20 or 25 years to not forget what I've gone through. So that's why I tell people everyone can advocate, but whatever that you can do to support those that are advocating, or even just the families, to do it. And I'll post on my page, my Facebook page, my linkage page, everything on how to donate. But my heart is just with those that are impacted. I just believe that God allowed me to go through that, and in going through that, his grace and mercy on giving me released early, I just cannot forget that. So I always have to
yes,
reach back and make sure those that are impacted know that they're not forgotten, that they're not loved. Sometimes it can get overwhelming. Don't get me wrong, it can get overwhelming. Sometimes I cry because sometimes, to a fault, just listening to you, that's part of my PTSD of being in prison during the holidays away from your family and feeling as if you're there alone, which is why I fight as hard as I do, which is why I give back as much as I do, because as many people as we can help to keep them encouraged and that will walk out one day and say, this lady never forgot me, even if they don't remember my name, if they just remember the name of the organization or just that lady, just to know that they
Yes.
weren't forgotten, or even mothers like you, Miss Green, to feel that I now have someone that I can support. Because I was once that mother self. I was the mother that was in prison
Yeah.
that could not fathom the thought of how I was going to do 7.5 years with my daughter still being out here. So, because God gave me grace and He eased that hurt and
Yeah.
pain, I want to help other people and other mothers, wives, girlfriends, daughters, sons, whoever, to also ease their pain as well.
Absolutely. I love that. And I feel that um, these are not just words that you're speaking, but I feel it in my soul. And I was thinking just now about there have been young men who were incarcerated with my son, and I became a surrogate mother to them because there are some whose mothers, had just completely written them off. And then there's a couple that have since been released, and they still every now and then call me to check on me if I'm okay. Do I need anything? Thanks for being my mom, while I was locked up, stuff like that. And so I feel this is not something that we're doing because we just want to be seen, because we want to, get a name. This is passion for us. This is coming
That's
from our
right.
hearts. And I absolutely am so happy that you joined me tonight. I have to get more. Like when I first started by inviting you, my first thought was, "Oh my God, she's not gonna come." Like, like she's probably gonna charge me like $25,000 or something. And so when I reached out to you and you said, "I'll be glad to come," I was like, "Wow." And I am absolutely so thrilled that we had this conversation tonight. I can't even verbalize to you how much I've learned. I've got 2 pages of notes here. Um, and
Well,
I'm
you
going
can
to,
just call me Miss Green at this point.
I know,
Just
but you
call
know
me.
what? I'm an old woman, right? And old people write stuff. My youngest son always teases me because he's telling me, such and such a thing, and I'm looking around for a piece of paper and a pen. And he's like, "For God's sake, mom, just put it in your phone." And I start laughing because my first thought is to find a piece of paper.
I know this right, Miss Green. Well, I'm here. I'm here. When you asked me, I was honored. I never charged to come on a podcast because this is a message that I just feel that needs to be out. I didn't have any money when the feds came because when you have a white collar crime, they cut off everything. You have to tell your job, everything. I had nothing. But a good mind, and my mom had always taught me research, look it up, find it for yourself, and that was the only thing that
Yeah,
helped me. I got one of my fed sisters. She was a hard cookie when I was locked up, so I know for her to be on this podcast, Kill, I know that I must have made an impact because I've been out for 3 years and I'm still very close to a lot of my fed sisters. They know they can call me for anything, especially if they need help with getting off supervised release. I helped a lot of the sisters and brothers
yeah,
secure early release of federal supervision, and then I do also help too with state. It's just that I was already connected in the feds because I did so much work with the
right,
sisters.
right,
You
right.
do work with the sisters, they're gonna bring their husband and their brothers and
Yeah,
other boyfriends in. So when I was released, I still had the same people that maybe was released before me or came after me or with me. They were still
Yeah.
contacting me. So then Fed people started connecting me with, said, come on, we need your help on the state level. So I went back home, which is Tennessee, and said, I'm going to start there as far as bringing some type of reform.
I love it. I love it. And it's just, it's very encouraging to me. And I want to thank each and every one of you who joined us tonight. Um, like, you have no idea how it blessed me to see you. Those of you who are personal supporters of Ms. King, thank you
Yes,
so much for
Mataki.
keeping, yeah, I love it. And keep her lifted in your prayers as well. And again, I'm getting ready to let you go because I try not to
Yes,
talk, but this has just been such a blessing to me. I really needed it. And I want to remind you guys to do me a favor and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Destiny with Jamie Green. That would really bless me as well. Keep me in your prayers. This advocacy work is not easy, and it's really challenging
right.
when you have other challenges like health wise or whatever. But as long as I'm breathing, I'm going to do what I can do. Thank you so much, Mr. Bradford. I'm definitely appreciate you for joining us tonight. I really do. Because I just feel like I'm down here by myself sometimes trying to get some work done. Um, and I've been on like a couple of webinars with ACL, Maryland ACLU, and Mothers Demand something or other, gun against gun violence. Couple of things I've been on, and when I'm talking, and they're like, "Where are you located again?" And I'm like, "The Eastern Shore." They act like they never even heard of it. And then when I say Ocean City, then everybody's like, "Oh yeah, we come down there every summer for the beach." I'm like, there's more going on here besides the beach, people. So, anywho, I appreciate you so, so much. I really do. Is there
I
anything
enjoyed
else
it,
that you
Ms. Green.
is there anything else you want to leave with the audience?
Well, I just want to leave my contact information. If you need to contact with me, it's just Marsha King, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And then my email is 13th, that's 13th, liberation, all one word, at gmail.com.
Awesome. All righty then. Well, again, I thank you so much for taking time to spend with me tonight and to share. I've learned a lot from you tonight. I've been blessed and I feel inspired to keep doing what I'm doing. And I, yeah, we will definitely talk and get that list from you. I just feel so much lighter after sharing with you tonight. So thank you
Yes.
so much.
You're
All
welcome. You all
right.
have a good night.
All right. You do the same. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.